Welcome to Tilly's Trans Tuesdays. This week we dive into what happens when trans women actually call out those responsible for fetishizing us and look at where all of this comes from. You won't believe it, but then again, maybe you will. Here's Chasers and the Fetishization of Trans Women 2, Reactions and Origins. Hi, I'm Tilly Bridges, your host, and I'm joined by my writing partner, my best friend, my wife, our token cis representation, the lady filled with righteous anger toward all the baddest guys, Susan Bridges.
Hello.
Our returning guest is Boone Williams, a transgender actor, comedian, and writer. She is best known for voicing the transgender character Astrid on the Netflix animated series The Dragon Prince. Welcome back, Boone.
So happy to be back. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so you recently did a solo show as part of the Joy Who Live Trans Theater Festival here in LA that Susan and I were also a part of, and you played 6 different characters all in conversation with each other, which was kind of amazing. So my question to you is, how do you do that as an actor?
Thank you so much for asking about that. How do you do that? I don't know. You just do it. I wish I had an interesting, smart answer.
You did, though. They were all so different. Like, you could tell they were different people. Even though it was just you, it dressed the same way, sitting in the same chair.
Yeah, I did want to keep the blocking and the staging very simple. So I was
Yeah.
costume changes would take way too long. Having multiple chairs would be too complicated. So I had like a couple little props to denote different
Yeah.
characters. But other than that, it was vocal and it was posture and it was everything. I think that I am a very wacky person and I've always had a lot of different sort of people living inside of me and my psyche. And so I like as I feel like when I wrote the show, I wasn't really writing it as one point of view. I was writing one monologue, I'm from this character's point of view, and then in the other monologue, I'm writing from this character's point of view. And so they just live in very different places inside of me, and I don't really have to think about it. It's just like, okay, now I'm Esther, now I'm Betty Rose, and if I were to get more technical in my answer, like I have a pretty big background in improv. I did Groundlings improv for a long time, and I'm in it right now actually. And they're very character focused, so it's a lot about like coming up with very distinct characters with distinct points of view very quickly and being able to just go. And also in voiceover, you have to do that a lot. Like they don't give you a lot of time to think. And I remember doing an episode of The Dragon Prince years ago when we were still recording it, and at the end of the session they were like, "Oh, we also need you to be this guard that's getting beaten up by a monkey." And I was like, "Okay." And, I had no preparation time at all. You just got to be this person. And so there's definitely training that comes with it, but I think ever since I was a little kid, have always been doing strange characters, and it's just what I do. It's what I do when I walk around my apartment. I'll talk in weird accents and become different people, and it's just how I keep myself entertained. So it comes very naturally.
Yeah, well, like all of acting is kind of magic to me. I believe actors are magic. So, but just seeing you like go from one to the next in person was just a wild thing. It's like, I don't even know. You're so talented.
Thank you very much. You guys are so talented, and I'm really bummed that I couldn't see your reading. But are you gonna post it anywhere?
After the festival, we have not decided yet, but I can send you the link to where it is now. So
Right, I forget they're all streaming right now. Okay, I will watch it. I will watch it, and
there's no pressure. No pressure.
no, I will. I'm excited too.
For you, what has been the most surprising thing about your transition?
That's such a good question. What has been the most surprising thing about my transition? Nothing goes how you expect in life ever, I would say.
Yeah.
And I think that like I always expected there to be like a moment where I'm like, I'm done. I did it. I transitioned and now I'm happy. And that's something I also felt like I would experience as an actor. And it's no, you have these big milestones that feel
Sure.
great. Absolutely. I would say the most obvious one for me was getting gender confirmation surgery, bottom surgery, whatever you want to call it, which was huge and really positively impacted my life. But there wasn't it's just a very non-linear process. So maybe that
Yeah.
was surprising because I think being a young person making the very conscious decision to go with the medical transition when I was 15, I think I decided early. I think I decided when I was like 13. It just took a long time to get through it because I had some barriers with health stuff. But yeah, I think realizing that it's so gradual. I remember being that age and thinking like I'm gonna sort of practice being a woman. Like I of course and I knew that I already was one, but in terms of how
Yeah.
I was presenting myself, I'm like I'm gonna practice at home privately. My voice, how I dress, my makeup, grow my hair out, all these things. And then one day I'm gonna flip the switch and I'll just be out as a woman everywhere. And I realized that's not how you can, it's just not really feasible to do it that way. It has to be this gradual, uncomfortable thing where
Yeah.
you're going out where you don't really feel comfortable in your skin, but you have to sort of go out in the world anyway. You're kind of forced to.
Yep.
And also, I mean, this is a whole other topic as well, but like what what medical professionals and mental health professionals require of you in order to sign off on your transition, you
Yep.
kind of have to prove that you're committed. Like go wear makeup and go out and do like all these things. So part of just the logistical challenge of getting what I wanted involved doing things I didn't really feel ready for.
They were still doing that to you.
Hmm.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah, no, it was a real challenge to get letters. I remember I saw a psychologist to get one of my letters for surgery, and she said no at first, even though
What?
it was so clear that I was trained. I had been on hormones for a long time. I had been like clearly living my life as myself for a long time, but because I had OCD and have OCD, she was like, I don't think you'll be able to handle all the cleaning and the sanitary issues post-op because it requires a lot. Like your OCD is so
What?
bad. And I'm like, first of all, do you really know anything about that? Like, do you know? And you're not a surgeon. You're an uptight white lady, and like you don't. That's not. And second of all, what makes you think that even if that's a challenge, that would stop me? Like,
I
it
am
was
so
so
mad on
absurd.
your behalf. Oh
Yeah, it
my
was,
God.
but luckily it wasn't after that. I just had to basically like say to her, I'm gonna work on my OCD and then email her and be like, I did it, I'm better. Like I pretty much just had to lie. And then she wrote a letter.
Wow.
But she was like, I could get my license taken away. And also not only that, but I just don't feel like it's ethically incorrect because I can't, you're not mentally well enough to get it. I'm like, I'm not mentally well because I haven't had it, girl.
That is horrible. Like the
Yeah.
worst thing that I had to go through was to even get the hormones. I had to spend an hour talking with a therapist proving that I'm actually a woman to her
Yeah.
until she believed that I was and then would okay it. So that's all just such awful nonsense. We shouldn't have to do any of that. That's really bad. I'm so
No, we
sorry.
shouldn't. The hoops that they make us jump through is crazy,
Yeah.
and just that anyone would think we would like that anyone would whimsically say, "I would like to transition" when they're not. It's not deeply an important issue for them. Is like, who would choose that? Like, it
Yeah.
drives me nuts. But
Right. And the oh, it's just so easy. They're giving it to kids at school. I'm like, you don't not even
I
know how
wish.
hard it is,
Yeah, I
right?
wish. I wish. Yeah.
People who have never dealt with the healthcare system in any real way just don't get it.
Yeah,
No.
well,
No, it's so hard to, I mean, you never mind being trans. It's so hard to get proper
yeah,
Yeah.
care for anything in this country.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you had one piece of advice for someone that was just starting their transition, or if there was something you wish you knew ahead of time going in, what would it be?
That transitioning is ultimately about finding comfort and peace and celebration of who you are. And it's not, even though you can look to other people as inspiration, whatever makes you happy in your life is going to help alleviate dysphoria, whether it's obvious, like, oh, I'm going to grow my hair out, or it's like, I love Sonic the Hedgehog and I'm going to play Sonic the Hedgehog every day. Like, I remember realizing, like, because I think a lot of us go through this where we start to transition. We're so excited by what feels possible now that we go very hyper feminine in our
Yep.
presentation. I know I did that. I'm like, oh, I want to wear dresses and skirts and do all this makeup and blah 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 and wear crop tops and like and exciting like discovering this newfound sexuality and all these things. And then, as time went on and I realized I didn't need to do that. And I didn't have anything to prove. I
Yeah.
realized that there's a lot of masculine qualities or traditionally masculine qualities within myself that actually make me feel less dysphoric when I embrace them because like that's it's just who I am and being who I
Sure.
am is what alleviates dysphoria, whether it's
Yeah.
traditionally feminine or not. The biggest example is that this is documented because I've done YouTube and stuff. If you go back, you can hear my voice used to sound a lot higher pitch, and I used to just kind of I was sort of trying to hit this target that was sort of arbitrary and I guess based on women that I knew or whatever. And I could have maintained it. I mean, I could have like I have pretty good vocal control. I know how to do all that stuff. If I wanted to have a higher pitch voice that sounds more again doing air quotes traditionally feminine. I could have, but I found that relaxing it and making it a little lower, even when sometimes people will even describe it as masculine, or I've even been misgendered, like in recent years because of it. It's who I am. It makes me, this is how I feel I am. This voice
Yeah.
is not just my physical voice, but it's my inner voice. And so that, I guess alleviating dysphoria comes from unusual sources. And I think if I could tell someone early on, it's that you're going to learn a lot about yourself through this process and try to be open to it and never beat yourself up for the trial and error of it all because it just involves experimentation and vulnerability and it's scary and challenging, but so worth it.
Absolutely right. I love that. Very well said.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, before we move on, do you want to remind folks one more time where they can find you online after listening?
Yes, all the social media that you're on, it's going to be at Boone W. Williams, BoonWWILLIAMS.
Perfect. Okay, go follow her.
Yay.
All right, friends, be sure that you have heard part 1, explanation and examples in episode 155 first, because you may think you know or obliquely understand the sexualized harassment that trans women face. But I'd bet all my pizza you don't actually know how bad it really is. And it is important that you do understand that so you comprehend the extent of the problem. We're not just being overly sensitive or quote unquote emotional women who blow things out of proportion. And if you think that means there's a misogynistic component to all this, you are absolutely right. But it is not just misogyny, it is also transphobia. What we're discussing is the intersection of the two, trans misogyny. Just like the good trans intersectionality talked about way back in episode 10 of this show, that we must continually strive and push for to make happen, trans women sit at the intersection of those two bigotries and it affects us in unique ways. This is not in any way condoning or minimizing the sexualization and harassment that cis women face. It is disgusting, it is awful, and it is wrong. But so is trans misogyny, and the fetishization of trans women is where it's important that we talk about the difference. While trans women and cis women share in a lot of the same abuse from the same people, what trans women experience is also different, and it's so important to talk about that because if we don't, people don't know. This isn't just garden variety sexism, it goes so much deeper. After a particular bout of bad chasers, I made a short and incredibly straightforward social media post. It reads, "Hi, cis white guys. It is never okay to comment on a photo of a trans woman with, quote, I do you. Stop it forever." I posted this across all social media that I'm on because, again, on all of them, chasers are a problem to different degrees. This time, it was the Fediverse/Mastodon that collectively lost its shit. I got so much equivocation from so many people.
Oh, Mastodon.
Many,
Silly.
yeah, many were along the lines of, more than cis white men are sexual harassers, actually, when I certainly never said they were the only offenders. I was just specifically talking to them. A reply someone sent me on Mastodon reads, "Today I learned that black guys are allowed to sexually harass me according to Mastodon.social." That is clearly not what I said at all. I got a lot of those. Eventually, I felt compelled to respond. My reply, "Okay, but this is a real problem for trans women that is caused by cis white men, and we can and should talk about that and not widen the scope when it's not the point here." And then I got a lot of, actually, cis women get sexually harassed too, which is like saying, quote unquote, all lives matter in response to Black Lives Matter, Like, yes, all women get sexually harassed, and yes, all lives matter, but we are talking about a specific issue and we need you to listen. A reply I received on Mastodon reads, so cis women don't deserve the same respect as trans? I deserve respect. Stop being sexist. I then replied, but that's not what I'm talking about here. This is the equivalent of all lives matter. I'm not talking about sexual harassment in general. I am talking about cis white men who are chasers and have orchestrated the entire anti-trans movement. And if the last line of my reply there pulled you up short, keep listening. These are just some of the examples I thought to screen cap, but there were so many more. There were some that enraged me so much that I entirely forgot about screen caps entirely, like the dude who suggested, quote, I should not speak for all trans women because some of them probably like it. The it there being sexual harassment. But I do have my reply to him. Hey, bud, when a person from a marginalized community speaks about the gross sexual harassment she continually experiences, your job is to listen and believe her, and not say that some trans women might like being sexually harassed by cis white men. Do better, do so much better. What the F? Because what it came down to for these folks was that trans women could not talk about one specific problem that affects her and the cause of it without people rushing in to make false equivalencies and excuses for why we do not need to talk about exactly that. And if you don't think a whole lot of that is wrapped up in our societal, implicit, and often very explicit trans misogyny, you're not really paying attention. Society teaches us all continually to not believe women and to not trust trans people, and thus to not believe or trust trans women. Please, again, listen to episode 57 on implicit queerphobia if you do not understand. What kind of reactions have you experienced, Boone, when you're like calling out chasers or trying to talk specifically about like the trans misogyny that we face?
You know what's crazy is that I don't think I've called out a chaser ever, which is the wild thing. And I'm trying to think if there's a reason for that, if it's never felt worth it. I mean, maybe that speaks to this whole issue a lot, is that I'm like, I have so little faith that there would be any positive response to it.
Yeah.
Because I think there's two categories. I think there's people who would argue against it, like you've just exhibited, or there is the category of people who are just completely unaware of it.
Yeah.
I think that so little people understand what we go through, and which is why I'm so happy we're doing these episodes. But it's never like it hasn't even come, the idea hasn't even crossed my mind of like, let me call this out because it's, I'm so used to it and I have so little faith anyone would take any kind of action, which is I don't think it's helpful to think that way. But it is also a product of the society we live in. It's
Yeah.
not, you know, so it's like,
It can feel kind of futile.
it can.
Yeah.
But I will say I've certainly witnessed things that I would like to call out. And I think there was one time I almost did, and I think I didn't again because I was just like, people are just gonna yell at me, and what's the point? And it was
Yeah.
this video on TikTok that really I found it to be one of the most infuriating. It's not even, it's not chasery, but it kind of, I feel like it's in that territory, so I'll bring it up. It's one of the most infuriating videos I've ever seen, which is saying a lot. And I don't know why it made me tick more than others, because I've seen some bad stuff. But there was it's this woman, this young, attractive, cisgender woman walking through, I guess, a bar or something, and some guy is like saying, hey, he's in a group of guys, and it's that mob mentality of like pack animals, and he says like,
Yeah.
hey, or whatever, trying to hit on her, obviously. And it's just a point of view. She's like vlogging or whatever, and she just says, I have a dick. And then the whole comment section is like, oh, I'm gonna start doing that. Oh my gosh, that's perfect. And everyone's laughing about it. And I was like, it was late at night when I was watching that, and I wanted to make a response about like, this is so harmful, and people don't realize,
Yeah.
they don't even real like, some people are explicitly transphobic in that comment
Yeah.
section. Some people, I think, I don't want to excuse them, but I don't think it's a hatred that's coming from that. It's more of it's a lack of understanding of the harm they're doing, and
Yeah.
they're just using they're using transphobia to their advantage without even thinking about it. But I've never called it out.
It feels like if they thought about it, they would realize that even saying that puts them in more danger.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
you like, hello, stop it. You are making our lives extra difficult, and you don't need to do that. Please stop.
Yeah, you're making your life
Yeah.
more difficult too. You go on, Susan.
I don't When you mentioned that, like, I don't think I ever saw the video, but I think I remember people talking about it
Yeah.
when you
Probably.
mentioned that,
Yeah.
how dumb it was.
Well, and all it does is then if you're using that as an excuse to get cis men harassers to leave you alone, what you are then doing also is making them more angry at trans women, which is the last thing we need.
Yeah, it really flips the whole thing, like, where it's like, "Oh, I think this is a safe thing for me to do," which is like, "Oh my god, like, how ignorant can you be?" Like,
Yeah,
what?
it's not. I mean, yeah, it's the obvious problem is that you're throwing a very marginalized, oppressed group under the bus and making the world less safe for them. And then the perhaps less obvious issue is that actually that could make you less safe in that situation.
Yeah.
What makes you think they're going to leave you alone after
Yeah.
that? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah, if I would be terrified in that situation. I would be like, I need to get out of here. I'm going to be the victim of violence if I don't. So it's like, why? It's not even achieving what you think it's achieving.
Yeah, yeah,
It's so
yeah.
messed up.
Yeah,
Ugh.
but I will say that I have called out transphobia in the comedy world, and part of the reason I've had such a complicated relationship with doing stand-up is that I don't know if it's the same in every major city, but certainly here in Los Angeles, it is a transphobic community. And
Yeah.
it's very toxically masculine. Like it's horrible to be a
I think
woman in
all of
comedy.
stand up is like that.
It's
Yeah.
like that, yeah. But I think everywhere, it's horrible to be a woman in comedy. It's horrible. And one of the things that makes me the most upset is watching women themselves on stage, like using misogyny to try and get laughs.
Yeah.
And they're not making fun of misogyny, they're actually being misogynistic. What I try to do
Right.
is make fun of transphobia, and I try to do it in a way that actually even transphobic people would laugh at because they don't even realize what I'm doing. But I'm trying to plant the seed subconsciously
Yeah.
where they can maybe start to unravel the absurdity of these beliefs that they
Yeah.
hold.
Yeah. That's the genius of comedy because it can get into people without them realizing. You can get them thinking about things that if you approach them straight, seriously, they would instantly say no. But if you get
Yeah.
them laughing, it opens different doors in their brain, I think. So,
Yeah, absolutely it does. So I've called people out in that, but it's I think you get like what I've received a lot of is an outward support that doesn't actually lead to any change. You know,
yeah.
people are like, "Oh, yeah, that's bad," and then they continue to kind of make their own transphobic jokes and
Do nothing to change or make things better. Yeah.
I
yeah, yeah,
think
it's
also,
performative empathy is what I call it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
like, as comedy writers, like, trying not to punch down
Right.
and like, it just feels so lazy, but also, like, I have, like, a certain amount of empathy for these female comics who have worked so hard to get up so high, but they also internalize the misogyny and transphobia, and then
Yeah.
it just becomes a part of
They perpetuate it.
everything, and they perpetuate it, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it sucks,
It does.
and it's important to call out when comedy is punching down and
Right.
lazy
But again,
and
and I think we've talked about a few other times on
stereotypical.
this show that, like, for trans people to call out the transphobia is a very dangerous thing for us to do. We might never
Yeah.
work again if we do that. That's why it has to be on the cis people, especially cis het white men, who are the ones that are
Yeah.
the safest and will continue to get work even when they're harassers. Like, call this out and make people stop. You're the ones they'll listen to, and you will face no repercussions for doing so.
But yet they will never come in contact with a trans person getting up that high in comedy
Yeah.
because, you know.
Yeah.
And I know we got to move on to others, but I have to add to that too. It's like it's kind of unbelievable to me how I have never seen anyone advocate for this kinds of things that I advocate for on like I have so many close friends that I've met through comedy that love me and are very out expressively like positive around me and they're like, "Oh, I love what you talk about. You're brave and all this stuff." But I'm like, "Well, maybe you should be brave." You know, be brave for me because I'm not the message I'm trying to get out, people they're not hearing it. If you have the privilege and the platform, maybe they'll listen to you, but we're not it's not being achieved. And
Yeah.
there are celebrities who will be like trans women are women, but that means nothing. That means, I mean, it doesn't mean nothing, but I like to see it. It's nice to know, like, okay, this celebrity I like in this show or whatever has said a trans positive thing, but it doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
You have to be specific. You can't just do a general positive message. Be specific. This is a behavior that I've witnessed. This is why it's not okay. Or this
Yeah.
is what we need to be doing more of. That's helpful, not just like love is love, you know?
Yeah. It has to come with action or it doesn't mean anything or do any real good. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Well, the flip side of all of this is that our society also implicitly tells us that cis white men are the best thing there is to be. They are to be held in esteem, respected, defended, no matter what. They cannot be wrong. Look at how impossible it is to actually prosecute sex crimes in this country. Look at how cis white men can get away with millions of things anyone of any other race or gender combo simply cannot. Because the cis white men in power will excuse themselves and punish everyone else for the very things they themselves are doing. If this sounds a whole lot like the Republican tactic of DARVO, deny, attack, reverse victim, offender, where the bigoted people in power accuse everyone else of doing the thing that they themselves are doing in an effort to obscure their own actions, there's a very good reason. They famously accuse trans people of being groomers who want to sexually exploit children. Link in the show notes. Their supporters famously concocted the Pizzagate scandal about Democrats running a child sex trafficking ring out of the basement of a pizza shop that didn't have a basement. Link in the show notes. It is no coincidence that Pizzagate sprung up during 2016, the first time Trump was elected, because guess who's mentioned in the Epstein files about an actual child sex trafficking ring perpetrated by the world's richest cis white men more than 1,000 times? Yes, link in the show notes. Even the now far-right slanted New York Times, which will clean up Trump's nonsensical rambles and sanitize his horrible words when reporting them, quote, found more than 5,300 files with references to Mr. Trump and related terms. They include salacious and unverified claims. Yes, link in the show notes. And that is from the newspaper that itself is responsible for intentionally laundering so much of the rich cis white men's trans misogyny to make it seem like just asking reasonable questions and help lead us to right where we find ourselves with the state of transphobic legislation. I was going to pull a quote from an article about it, but there are too many and the context is too important. So please do read from a trans reporter who was there the account of the active and intentional anti-trans stories the New York Times was pushing. The article is from the Trans News Network titled A Directive from Above. Former NYT editor lays out how the paper pushes anti-trans bigotry. It is, of course, in the show notes. I also want to note that all of those instances of Trump's name in the Epstein files that both CNN and the New York Times reported on were after a ton of pages were mysteriously never released by Trump's Department of Justice. He's in there that many times without even all of the likely worst files released. It is getting old, but there is so much evidence, and you need to know I am not making this shit up. So yes, link in the show notes. Also, yes, of course, more than Republicans use DARVO. Any cis man in power will use it, a lot. But this is not about all cis men. It is about a specific subset at the root of the problem we are talking about, the white ones. Because Republicans are the ones working so hard to take all trans rights away. Some of them don't even hide it. Let me bring back this one incredibly bizarre chaser example from last week. Sigma Male 2022 on Insta DMs me. Well, he's the one that wanted to see me swallow his goldfish. Okay.
Which is animal cruelty.
It sure is. But make note of his username, Sigma Male 2022. If you are not aware, it's what right-wing bros who are obsessed with making their masculinity as toxic as possible call themselves by dividing men into classes, sigma, alpha, beta, etc. These are, of course, the same guys who say gender is innate and immutable, and then do everything they can to make their gender very mutable so they can be an extra big special man. There's yet another link in the show notes. And this is where I explain the last line of my social media post above. I am talking about cis white men who are chasers and have orchestrated the entire anti-trans movement. Here's a document released in the Epstein files that I really need you to read. It's not one of the ones with the worst, most awful details about what those horrendous people did to children, but it is really important. I am horrified and disgusted to have to share this, but I have to because you have to know. From Robert Trivers to Jeffrey Epstein, subject, trans. Date, Monday, 17th of December, 2018. It is very simple. I will compare male to female with greater molecular control over development we are increasingly capable of producing. novel phenotypes, more feminine men by blocking testosterone receptors or castration, and at the same time increasing estrogen production. The one blocks male features, the second encourages female features. More masculine women, heavy testosterone dosage, incredible external effects. Heavily bearded men, you would never guess they had a female bone in their body. The first kind, male to female, is 4 times more frequent than female to male. The first is attractive. He is a woman with a cock. So that your fantasy is to suck a man's dick, otherwise you are completely heterosexual. It would be much nicer if the rest of the organism is female, then you get the best of both worlds. So many transsexual women are very attractive and easily make money, which in turn they assert promotes their prostitution since they have to pay hefty fees for injections every week. But they are sexually happy. Once you have reached manhood, even castration does not prevent the sensation of organism. Contrast the poor female to male versions. They are very unhappy and lonely. They are men with mum-pums, the worst of both worlds. If you like smelly masculine men, you want that hard cock that comes with the show nature's more complex and variable structures, the pum-pum that is an acquired taste and not with a man. But there are hundreds of female trans videos and websites. I have never seen a male one. By the way, we are now pushing the intervention earlier, so you notice your 3-year-old son has trans tendencies, so now you intervene with hormones. I would be frightened to do that, but who knows? That email is from Robert Trivers, a sociobiologist.
That
Quote-
doesn't sound real.
It's real.
Well, I mean, he's made up this.
Quote from a link in the show notes. Trivers was a key figure within Epstein's circle regarding Epstein's interest in funding research about transgender people. Maybe they were just horn dogs. You're reading into things, Tilly. Was Trivers really that bad? Well, in addition to his crackpot theory that finger length determined transness, there's this choice quote from another link in the show notes. Notably, in 2015, Trivers was interviewed by Reuters about his financial relationship with Epstein, saying that the financier remained a friend even despite his allegations of sexual abuse of a minor. Quote, did he get an easy deal? Did he buy himself a light sentence? Well, yes, probably, compared to what you or I were get. But he did get locked up. Trivers told the publication at the time, by adding, by the time they're 14 or 15, they're like grown women were 60 years ago. I don't see these acts as so heinous, he said. End quote. Here's a quote from How the Pseudoscience is Made from Dark Money to an Academic Journal. Quote, in one email, Trivers pulled off the triple crown of transphobia. He is clearly a chaser who wants to use his status as a researcher to naturalize his own sexual appetites. Epstein explicitly funded Trivers' work on transgender people. When you go back to that email from Trivers to Epstein that I included, they are likely talking about making trans women so that they can sexually subjugate us. They despise trans people but feel because we are quote-unquote feminized men that they can dominate us and literally treat us like sex slaves. And now you see why they call us she-males and femboys. The emphasis is on the part of us that they identify as quote-unquote male. And these are the same group of people that have orchestrated the entire anti-trans movement, link in the show notes. And they do it to force us into sex work to get access to our hormones and other transition care. Doctors, by the way, used to do this to trans women all the time. Listen to episode 60 of this podcast on Transmedicalism and WPATH version 1 for more. In fact, one of the most prominent doctors who performed trans surgeries is in the Epstein files. Quote from a link in the show notes. Quote, Dr. Jess Ting is a plastic surgeon and surgical director of Mount Sinai's Center for Transgender Medicine and Surgery in New York City. He is a pioneer in the field of vaginoplasty, having innovated the peritoneal vaginoplasty technique for trans-femme bottom surgeries. He's also all over the Epstein files. His name appears in the files over 900 times, though many of these are emails which the surgeon is CC'd on a longer email chain with other people. There are no implications that Ting engaged in any malfeasance or criminal activity related to Epstein's international pedophile ring, but it's clear that the two had a personal and professional relationship with each other that lasted past the time Epstein was initially charged with sex-related crimes. End quote. A trans woman was one of Epstein's first victims and the first to accuse him of sexual assault. She was mocked by the press. The story is sensational quote-unquote shock about her gender and not the assault that she survived. Multiple links in the show notes. A quote. Quote, with a transphobic smear campaign, in 2007, it was seen as acceptable to call a trans victim's testimony into question. Why? Because trans people are still seen as quote-unquote crazy, as people who were lying about their gender and potentially everything else. At a time when trans people weren't seen as reliable narrators of their own stories or bodies, Cordero's bravery was shunned, mocked, and shamed. End quote. Do you see how it is all connected? No? Here's a quote from an article in the show notes on how Epstein backed a, quote, billionaire's dinner network of prominent anti-trans figures. Quote, Lawrence Krauss, Richard Dawkins, Steven Pinker, and other anti-trans influencers personally benefited from a right-wing academic social group backed by infamous human trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, sometimes meeting at his island. End quote. Oh, this is also exhausting. The rise of transphobia and the fetishization of trans women are inextricably linked because they were all orchestrated at a societal level by the same people. And yes, trans women's fetishization has definitely also been on the rise, right along with transphobic legislation by design. Fossil fuel billionaires are bankrolling the anti-trans movement. Link in the show notes. Here's a quote from another article in the show notes from prominent trans author and writer Julia Serrano. Quote, what is new is that, starting around 2015, in the wake of increased trans visibility in the media, sometimes called the quote-unquote transgender tipping point, and the Supreme Court's decision in Obergefell legalizing same-sex marriage, social conservatives began shifting their efforts towards targeting trans people instead. The attacks have since grown into a highly coordinated and well-funded movement that churns out both anti-trans and broader anti-LGBTQ legislation at unprecedented levels. This is the real reason why Republicans have become obsessed with quote-unquote fairness in women's sports, biological sex, social contagion, restrooms, grooming, and other sound bites that didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago. In other words, there hasn't been an organic shift in public opinion on trans people, but rather a massive astroturfing campaign against us. Oh, okay.
Woo!
And there's more. There's another remarkably good article on the topic in the show notes, summing up a surprising increase in trans fetishization back in 2022 with lots of good data. A quote. Quote, trans porn's popularity appears to be in keeping with the general trends of the past few years. Last year, searches for trans grew 141%, with views of the trans category growing by 23%. In 2017, Pornhub also published a report specifically on the popularity of trans porn. For the most part, and for better or worse, it found that the popularity of trans porn has been steadily increasing since the mid-2010s. This particular bump in the popularity of trans porn, in addition to last year's growth, is of course happening at the same time that lawmakers have introduced the highest number of anti-trans and general anti-LGBTQ plus bills in history. That these two occurrences are simultaneous is probably no coincidence. Last year, an Alabama Republican lawmaker who voted to criminalize doctors who provide minors with transition-related health care was caught liking trans porn on Twitter. And a study from lawsuit.org additionally found that Google users in Republican states are overwhelmingly responsible for the popularity of certain trans-related porn search terms like quote-unquote she-male and quote-unquote tranny. Yep. That study from lawsuit.org is titled Data Finds Republicans Are Obsessed with Searching for Transgender Porn and is linked in the show notes. A quote. Quote, with more than 4.7 million transgender porn-related Google searches each month per ahrefs.com, do Republicans represent those searching most? The answer seems to be a clear yes. In fact, the more Republican they are, the more they seem to like it, end quote. There is a ton of good data in that article, like this. The top 20 most transgender porn-obsessed states, starting with number 1. Texas, Georgia, Kentucky, Missouri, Kansas, Virginia, North Carolina, Illinois, which, by the way, I was born there and outside of Chicago is very conservative, Mississippi, Tennessee, Ohio, Indiana, Arkansas, Iowa, Louisiana, Michigan, Oklahoma, Alabama, Florida, and Pennsylvania. The top 20 most transgender porn-obsessed metro areas. Wichita Falls, Texas, and Lawton, Oklahoma coming in at number 1. Atlanta, Georgia. Denver, Colorado. Nashville, Tennessee.
Wow.
Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Paducah, Kentucky. Minneapolis, Minnesota. Little Rock, Arkansas. Lexington, Kentucky. Bismarck, North Dakota. Amarillo, Texas. Lincoln, Nebraska. Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Charleston, West Virginia. Indianapolis, Indiana. Springfield, Massachusetts. Dallas, Texas. Memphis, Tennessee. Richmond, Virginia. And Kansas City, Missouri. And there are illuminating graphs, which you can see in the text version of this topic at
Tilly'sTransTuesdays.com.
showing Google searches for she-male, tranny, and femboy, with the most left voters looking them up the least. And as the political spectrum shifts to the far right, the searches for those terms drastically increases. And the demographic that consumes the most trans porn is also older. Quote, looking at the popularity of trans porn compared to other age groups, we found the 18 to 24 age group was negative 22% as likely to watch trans porn as other demographics. The next age group, 25 to 34, was negative 1% as likely to watch it. After that, the older people get, the more likely they are to watch trans porn. It rises from plus 4% in the 35 to 44 age group to plus 21% for the 65 plus age group. And generally, the older people are, the more conservative and thus transphobic they tend to be. Quote from a link in the show notes. Quote, boomers take the crown as the age group who consumes the most transgender videos on Pornhub. Isn't it ironic how the generation that speaks out against trans rights happens to be the biggest fan of the genre? The call is always coming from inside the house. End quote. Does any of this come as a surprise to you, Boone?
Sure doesn't. Also, my mom she's originally from Wichita Falls, which is just so very funny to me. Yeah, no, it does not come as a surprise at all. This has been so well documented at this point that it's hard to believe that the far right just ignores it and continues their quest to stop us from being human beings.
Yeah, right? Like, it feels so obvious to me, but I'm so glad that we're doing these episodes because I feel like so many cis people who aren't part of the far right just don't realize how much it is all connected and how the way we're treated, the way we're portrayed in media, the way we're fetishized, and all the anti-trans legislation, it's all part of the same awful thing.
Yeah. No, yeah, I know people don't see the connection, and that is kind of mind-blowing because to me and to you and to so many people it's clear as day, and I don't know, like what are we doing here, you know?
Right? Like, I knew logically, I knew in my head that it was these same people, right, that were responsible for everything that's going on. But then also, like, to see it laid out like this and how completely obvious it is and how strong the connection between it all is, it kind of still surprised me a little bit because I didn't think it was that blatant and that obvious. I'm like, this is
Right.
all so obvious now. It just,
Yeah.
Well, and it's like attacking from every angle, right? Like,
Yeah.
we're just watching a documentary about librarians and
and book bans.
the book bans,
Yeah.
and how like Moms of Liberty started up during the pandemic, and they're
About anti-masking.
right, and
Mm.
they were very well funded, and they were all over the place, even though they never would tell anyone where they were getting their money from. But
Yeah.
all the books that they were banning and they're not just anti-LGBT books. They're also like anti-learning about racism and
Yeah.
anti-learning
Right.
about the KKK. And it's like so obvious that this is not just an organic thing.
It's an
coming
orchestrated
from-
campaign of
Right.
hate.
All
Yeah.
of it is orchestrated to dehumanize queer people, like as a whole.
Yeah.
And hopefully the trans people, because like they just want to do it all, right? Like, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very odd thing to have grown up. I didn't know the word transgender until I was 12, I think is when I first heard it. and I knew that I knew I was a girl from an early age, but
Yeah,
I didn't know anything about that terminology or that you could transition or anything. So to grow
sure.
up being completely unaware of any of that, and then even in the early couple years of my transition to still being it's not a talked about, understood thing at all, to now it's
Yeah,
all anyone ever talks about. I'm like, what has happened? What is this obsession?
yeah, it's wild.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
wild. Not in a great way.
Yeah, no, you go from feeling completely hidden to feeling exposed in the worst way possible.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
What you have to understand is these right-wing men have bought into the lie of what a man is quote unquote supposed to be, and it has made them miserable. Trans people prove you don't actually have to listen to anyone who tells you who you have to be. You can be your own true self and be happy. Trans women were collectively quote unquote gifted with being labeled cis males at birth, and society says that is the best thing everyone can be. And we collectively said, nah. And to them, that means their misery is their own fault for buying into the lies, and they cannot have that. So they've got to call us men while at the same time hating their own attraction to us because we're not men. And that comes out in the form of fetishization and dehumanization. We are just things to be used and worth nothing more to them. Also, they can still feel in control of who they are and what the world is. The evidence is incontrovertible, really. It's all right there in front of you if you bother to look. Do the chasers in my DMs know that they're doing what Epstein and Trivers and so many others wanted? Likely not. Chasers have existed for as long as trans women have. But those dudes know it benefits them, as cis white men, because it was originated to do exactly that. Those right-wing bigots idolize their rich figureheads, which is where they learned, albeit often implicitly, to treat trans women as nothing more than dehumanized sex objects. I've shown you these kind of links before, like how excluding trans people from sports is literal Nazism. And guess what Nazis were? Far-right bigots. Listen to episodes 125 and 126 on Trans Sports 1 Origins and Advantages and Trans Sports 2 Science and Bigotry. And like how legislating against trans kids is nothing but propagandic fear-mongering meant to turn the tide against trans people as a community. Listen to episodes 127 and 128 on Trans Kids 1, Facts and Dangers, and Trans Kids 2, The Intake Exam and Trans Flight. The fetishization of trans women is wrapped up in all of that, as is the erasure of trans men, as discussed in episode 14 of this show, which is pointedly done because their existence refutes everything these terrible cis white men stand for. It is all connected. Stop doing the work of bigoted, racist, trans-misogynist, ultra-rich cis white men and treat us like actual human beings. And if you don't start seeing it and believing trans women when we talk about it, things are only going to get worse. Thank you for being here, Boone, especially because this was not an easy topic to discuss, and I really appreciate you being willing to talk about it.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Honestly, it's not easy, but it's cathartic at the same time, and it's to come with a like-minded, intelligent fellow trans human being
Oh,
and be
thank you.
able to speak candidly on such difficult but important topics. It feels nice in its own way, and I'm glad we could speak on these things, and I'm glad you're illuminating them, and I just hope more and more people can listen, and not only listen, but take action.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Folks, if you want to make things better, you need to start by listening when we tell you what our experiences are, not correcting us, not but all womening us, not but all cis menning us. Believe us. And finally, please learn. Tilly Bridges, end transmission. Tilly's Trans Tuesdays is hosted by Tilly Bridges and Susan Bridges, with audio editing and sound mixing by Jillian Morgan. The written essay version of this week's topic and all past topics is available at tillystranstuesdays.com. Special thanks to Daisy and Jane for the use of Sorry Not Sorry as our show's theme music. Please stop by and show your support at daisyandjane.bandcamp.com and soundcloud.com/daisyandjane. You can find me at Tilly Bridges on Blue Sky, on Mastodon at Tilly Bridges and Mastodon.social, and on Insta at Heck Yeah Tilly Bridges. And you can find Susan on those at Susan L. Bridges. You can find Jillian at Audio Jillian on Blue Sky. You can join the Tillyverse Discord server by following the link at the very bottom of tillystranstuesdays.com. We hold regular watch parties for the Matrix films and other trans movies, where I do a live Q&A, and it's blossomed into a wonderfully supportive, compassionate, kind community of friends. We'd love to have you join us. If you'd like to keep up with all the writing that Susan and I do, you can sign up for our newsletter at birdguestbroadcast.com. Signed copies of our comics and my book, Begin Transmission, The Trans Allegories of the Matrix, are available on my coffee shop at ko-fi.com/tillybridges. If you're listening on YouTube, it's so cliche, but please like and subscribe and take a few seconds to leave a comment. Those feed the algorithm and helps the show be found by so many more people. If you're listening on other platforms, ratings and reviews help just as much, and I'd certainly appreciate them. Thank you for your support. For more information, visit pendantaudio.com. Thanks for listening.